Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It so seems that the car or the vehicle is the go-to location to make these videos. So I figured I would follow suit and do the same. I want to respond to some of these videos that have been put out on YouTube and Facebook and other forms of social media in reference to racism and white privilege. Let me preface what I'm going to say with unequivocally, without question, I do believe that Islam is the source of rectification for all of these societal ills that we have. Islam is the source. Islam is the cure. Now, with that said, when we look at sicknesses, when we look at diseases, when we look at ailments that people have, the doctor has to first diagnose and know the specifics of the issue that he's going to try to fix. If he doesn't know the specifics as best as he can, then he's going to misdiagnose. He's going to, give the incorrect medicine or procedure to help a person who has whatever sickness it happens to be. The African American community has specific issues that come from a long history of systemic and institutional oppression. The ailments that the community has are sort of unique to them. There's no other community that I know of in America that has the history and the ongoing onslaught of oppression that the African American community has. I know someone would say the indigenous Americans. That's a different conversation that I'm willing to have if you ever want to have that. But nonetheless, the African American community has a unique history. It has a unique standing in this society. All of us are products of some type of social engineering. All of us, all people, black, white, Asian, Indian, whoever, we're all products of social engineering. There seems to be this idea that once a person says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, that everything that has made them from their experiences, from their history, their mentality, their heart, just fades away. All of the negativity or all of the incorrectness just fades away at the Shahadatain. So then what happens is issues like these issues that are hot button issues now, racism and white privilege and these things, don't really get addressed. They get, well, we're all Muslim. It's, racism is not a part of Islam. So therefore, anybody who talks about it is a nationalist, or anyone who brings this issue up is a troublemaker. And then you have people who may have Islamic degrees in, whatever. Alhamdulillah, may Allah preserve them. But that doesn't mean that they're qualified to necessarily diagnose issues in other communities that maybe they are not from. Hopefully that makes sense. These topics need to be dealt with within the Muslim community. Many times what I hear from non-POC Muslims, POC, people of color, non-POC, they get offended. They take it personally. as some type of attack. I'm tired of hearing black Muslims or African-American Muslims talk about white people, this, that, and the other, and they take it personal. Taking it personal tells me that you do not understand systemic and institutional oppression. You don't understand the apparatus and how it works if you are taking it personal. When we ask questions like, well, how do I have white privilege? How does white privilege, how do I benefit from it specifically? How do I personally, specifically, you know, Mr. Individual, how do I benefit from white supremacy or white privilege? This question in itself is problematic and shows that you do not understand, whoever has this type of idea, that you don't understand the macro level impact of these issues. Systemic oppression, systemic or institutional oppression is not a micro level issue. It's not a micro level. How does the individual? It's macro level, and it deals with systems and institutions that affect demographics and large groups of people. Case in point, the judicial system affects African Americans different than it affects non-PLC communities. When we talk about funding for education for schools based on the tax brackets and all of these things, these are, I'm just giving you, you know, examples. How communities are policed. How communities are policed is a big one. Interaction between police and the inhabitants of the communities that they are policing. Relegation to ghettos. Lack of quality health care. Food deserts. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. These are all manifest products of systemic and institutional oppression. So the flip side to that is when an individual says, well, how do I benefit specifically from white privilege? Again, when you look at it from a macro level perspective, that kind of question, it doesn't make sense, because the system is set up for certain groups to have, for the most part, certain leeway, certain safety nets, certain comfortabilities that other groups may not have. I, as an African-American man, don't necessarily like the police riding directly behind me. Whereas someone else who's never, and, you know, I've never been in trouble. No, I've never been to prison. No, I've never been locked up. But that's not the point. The point is, I know the history. And I know others who have had to deal with that. Whereas someone from a particular group or demographic that doesn't have that same history, when Officer, you know, Goodbody gets behind him, maybe he doesn't flinch. He doesn't think twice. He just says, oh, I hope this cop leaves me alone. Whereas someone else may say, man, I hope I don't die tonight. I hope this cop isn't tripping. There are comfortabilities that are extended to skin color. I, as an African-American man, when I walk down the street, my skin color cannot be hidden. It can't be downplayed. But a Muslim, a non-POC Muslim, even with a big lehia, big beard, he still has a level of comfort. And that comfort may not necessarily, or does not necessarily mean he is more comfortable, but it means that those who view him are more comfortable. And because they are more comfortable, then it's less opportunity for him to catch a bad one. There's less opportunity for him to have the police called on him for doing nothing, for standing there, eating a sandwich, sitting in Starbucks, drinking a coffee. There's less opportunity for drama, and there's less opportunity for confrontation. Many times, this comfortability is something that's subconscious. It's not something, and that is another part of white privilege, is that you don't really have to think about it. It really can be something that you don't have to think about it, and that is a latent byproduct of the social engineering. If you've lived your entire life in America as a white person, there are certain subconscious understandings that you digest. And I think that that's hard, a tough pill for some people to follow, or to swallow rather. But with all of that said, I think there needs to be an honest and open conversation, and not only conversation, but listening from people outside of marginalized and periphery communities, to not debate so much and not want to argue and counteract and give the counter narrative and ask questions like, well, what about me specifically? You individually, the individual is not the issue. We're talking again about systems and institutions, and the systems and institutions that we come up under end up following us into the ummah. So when I initially said that the person who takes their shahada, they don't lose the social engineering aspect of who they are. So they bring it into the ummah, and they bring it into the interactions with the Muslims. And it's not necessarily purposeful, but it is a byproduct of that which we digest by way of social engineering, by living in the society that we live in. None of us can run away from that. We have to understand that it exists. Once we understand that it exists, then we can deal with how to correct it. And that's the point, is the correction. Not asking, well, because I individually am not, a receiver of white privilege, then I don't have to answer for anything. I play no part in, what goes on in the society, because I personally didn't do anything. There is a morsel of flesh that if it is healthy, then the whole body is healthy. But if it's sick, then the whole body is sick. So we as an ummah need to recognize that these issues are affecting a demographic of the ummah, and it needs to be rectified. Now, the next part of this, under no way, shape, fashion, or form do I believe that all white people are responsible for slavery. Nor do I believe that all white people or white Muslims should be held responsible for the trespasses and evil done by their forefathers. With that said, understand, as much as you are not responsible for it, and I do believe you're not responsible for it, you are the benefactors of the system that they created. They created that system for you. It is generational. Racism, systemic oppression, and institutional oppression is generational. It's passed down through the institutions to maintain the status quo. You are not responsible, but you are the benefactor of it. So because you are the benefactor, and because you are a Muslim, then it's important that you do what you can do to help the situation. I had a brother who's overseas right now. We were talking, and he told me, and this is just something on the side, and I'm sure people will have varying opinions and you know, say what they say, but he told me, I don't see the white Muslims giving da'wah to their own people. I don't see them having conferences and giving da'wah to their own people. Doesn't mean it's not happening. No one is denying that it happens. But what he said was the people are not seeing it. We don't see the white Muslims speaking on the Ku Klux Klan, speaking on institutional racism and systemic oppression of marginalized and periphery demographics in America. We don't see that. Everything is, well, we're all one ummah. Racism isn't a part of the ummah. Therefore, we really don't have to deal with it. Or we're going to debate and argue with those who say that it exists, but not really ever get to the root of the problem and come to solutions, Islamic solutions. I think that once these ills are diagnosed properly, then those who are qualified Islamically, can then extract from the deen the proper medicine for the situations and for the demographics and for the different groups that need this help. So again, I do not believe that all white Muslims are responsible for what their forefathers did. I'll say it again because I know there'll be somebody who, you know, hard of hearing, they don't understand what I'm saying. I do not believe that white Muslims today, white people in general today, are responsible for what their forefathers did. But I do believe that they are the benefactors of the system that they set up back then that exists 2019. You are no doubt the benefactors of it. So if you think I'm wrong, then tell me I'm wrong, but bring more than just opinion, because I have a lot of data that I can post that will speak to certain demographics having certain things and certain demographics not having the equal, be it judicial system, be it access to health care, quality education, food deserts in certain communities, policing. I mean, the list is long. I can go on and on. So if you're going to say that what I'm saying is wrong, I'm going to ask you for some numbers. I'm going to ask you for some research, something other than opinion. As far as Islam being the solution, like I said before, I 100% unequivocal. I do believe Islam is the medicine. It is the what's going to be needed to rectify the society. But we need to understand that these issues exist. These issues are real. Certain groups within the ummah are affected by these societal oppressions, and these oppressions and institutions and ways of thinking and social engineering are now in the ummah, and we have to deal with it when we were non-Muslims, and we deal with it while we are Muslims. So hopefully no one is offended, and people understand the spirit in which I made this video. I want it to be understood that I love all the Muslims, black, white, Asian, Indian. And because I love all the Muslims, I want to see good for all the Muslims. And I want us to be able to live harmoniously upon equity and upon piety and upon tawheed and upon, you know, Islam in general. But we have to come to grips with some of the societal issues that are in effect. We have to come to grips to that, or with that. And we have to learn to swallow that tough pill and say, okay, these issues exist. My brothers and sisters are being oppressed, or they're dealing with some things, although I'm not dealing with it. I mean, from the eyes of a person who's not of color, my brother or my sister is dealing with it. Therefore, I want to help them. So hopefully what I said was clear. Anything that I said that was incorrect is from myself and the shaitan. What I said that's correct is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll see how it's received. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.